I'm Scott Allen Miller. This is my life living in Leon, Nicaragua. I had a question come up on the channel. We have some videos where we talk about just how cheaply can you live in Nicaragua, and someone had there's a video where we said, can you live in San Juan del Sur for $1,000 a month? And some people are like, absolutely, it's a challenge, but you can. And some people who live there are like, no, you absolutely cannot. And someone wrote in asking, I want to know how you can live on $200 a month, and felt that I had known someone who had done this. I'm like, no, I definitely don't know any foreigners who have managed to live at $200 a month here in Nicaragua, but that is a number that a lot of Nicaraguans actually do live at. And so they were wondering, now they actually upped the number to 300, but what would it be? What would it take to live at $300 per month here in Nicaragua? A lot, let me assure you, but that's what we're going to tackle on today's video. So we're going to get to, can you live in Nicaragua for $300, or what exactly would that look like right after the bump? Hopefully it goes without saying that $300 a month is an epic challenge to try to fit a life budget into such a small amount of money. That is $3,600 per year. Of course, there's always going to be some extenuating circumstance to explain why we're dealing with this particular number for someone who's looking at moving abroad, but let's take on this challenge and see what we can do. So when we talk about Nicaraguans who live at $200 a month, there's some of the things that we need to explain about this. First of all, that is a per person income. Of course, we hopefully are not talking about a family living at $300, but an individual person, so that should be comparable in that way. And typically people that are doing this, basically working at minimum wage, are living in very low-cost communities. They are living with family. It is standard here in Nicaragua for families to live together, even long after children are of working age, and especially at those ages, so that it is possible for the family to pool resources, do things together, spend more time together for sure, and allow grandparents and great-grandparents to be important parts of child rearing, allowing those who are of optimum working age, the parents, often to be able to go to work and continue to bring in income, while those who may be retired or not able to work full-time or whatever, to assist or completely handle child rearing. It's a different economic system and a different familial system, but one that tends to work pretty well, and it certainly is designed or naturally has grown up around the needs of this economy with a low employment rate and low income rates. However, life is very low cost here, so there are some advantages. For sure, it is possible to live at these numbers, but it is a struggle, of course. But it is important to understand that when people are at these very low numbers, we are talking about Nicaraguans. They are in their own country, so they have some advantages naturally, such as they are going to have family around. They have access to a large number of social safety net programs and government assistance programs and protections that as a foreigner you may not have. Now, the most important one, of course, is healthcare, and that does extend to you as a foreigner, so that is okay and is absolutely critical. If it wasn't for that, it would make it all but impossible. But with that, in theory, you can actually meet or exceed the quality of life in most other countries, because your health is essentially guaranteed within the bounds of what any external entity can guarantee for you. So that's a really big deal. Now, the way that they do this, like I said, they're living with families. So typically families that are living at these rates, they probably own a home or rent at incredibly low cost, but they most often have a home that may have been free. They may have constructed themselves. Many live in non-formal housing. It's very much like lean-tos. You're not going to own a lot of personal things. And imagine if you're talking about living in any other country and we said $300. What if you tried to live in the United States at $300, tried to live in Canada at $300, tried to live in Spain? None of those countries would you plausibly think it's even possible to live at $300. So when we're asking if we can do this in Nicaragua, we're trying to figure out if we can push the bounds of what minimal income will allow, and we're really, really doing something difficult here. So if we assume a few things, like you're managed to have family or friends who are going to allow you to live with them, and maybe you're going to contribute $10 per month or so towards the overall rent or cost of the house, something like that. Maybe that's going to work out. If you have to provide your own rent, though, that's going to be incredibly difficult. The question was posted in the video about San Juan del Sur, and San Juan del Sur is the most expensive general community within the country. General meaning not a sub-neighborhood of somewhere else. Managua definitely has the most expensive neighborhoods when you subdivide them into a very localized spot, but it's because because it's a great big city. If you're dealing with San Juan del Sur, it's a small village, but the cost throughout the village is extra high. Every little thing costs extra. Every taxi, every public transportation, every trip to the grocery store, every restaurant, everything, even people's salaries are going to be a little bit higher because they have to be. They have to cover the excess costs and everything. Now, it is possible to live in the general area of San Juan del Sur, maybe 3 to 5 miles away from the actual village, and the costs will essentially, in areas that are not interesting to extranjeros, to foreigners, will drop off pretty quickly and be essentially the same cost as other parts of the country. But it's important to remember that this is a very remote community. So if you need to be doing border runs to Costa Rica, yes, being very close to the border would be important. But if you don't, then there will be no advantages to being in that high-cost, far-flung area, and you will find far better accommodations closer to the center of the country where you don't have to make long-distance runs to do necessary things. Most people who are trying to live on the most extreme budgets are going to find that the lowest-cost neighborhoods of Managua are most likely going to be where your budget is going to go farthest. That is a little bit difficult, and maybe you can find better, and maybe someone who's tried this, right? I've not tried to live at this level of income. Someone with those challenges maybe can respond and tell us that, yeah, you know, there's certain types of villages that are going to get just a few dollars cheaper than Managua or whatever. But as a foreigner, you have some things you're going to have to do one way or another. One is you're going to have to come up with some way to be able to live in the country. Now, automatically, if you're coming from North America, for example, you can do the border run system. But when we're talking about a total budget of $300 per month, doing that border run, even if it's only twice a year, is not trivial. That is going to be a large cost. One way or another, you got to get to that border, get over that border, turn around, come back into Nicaragua, and get back to wherever you're living. Hence why San Juan del Sur would have an advantage in that particular case, but it's potentially only twice a year. However, in between those border runs, you still have to stop by Migracion, or the Department of Immigration, and visit them at least 3 times to be able to hold off that border run to only every 6 months. This is not a big deal, but if you live far from a city, then once again, you have a day of traveling into the city to deal with that. If you're able to make everything in your life walkable or something you can do on public buses, then it's probably pretty affordable. But if the things you're doing require any kind of specialty transportation, then it's going to get quite expensive. But it is worth noting that if even going on a $300 budget, if you have to go from Leon to Managua and home, while that is incredibly cheap, if you were to use public buses on every part of that path, you're still looking at $3 each way, which to an American sounds like it's free. But to someone on a $300 a month budget, that is 2% of your entire month's budget spent on just getting to and from Managua one time, even if it's not that far, right? Even just coming from Leon, yes, it's time consuming, assuming you don't have a job or $300 would not be your budget, then you have the free time to do it, but 2% of your budget being taken by the public transportation is noticeable. And this is why Nicaraguans still find the public transportation to be something that, while very affordable and usable, isn't something they can use willy-nilly. They have to still travel frugally because their incomes are often low, and so those little things like that add up quickly. They have to think about all the little costs that could be incurred day to day when you're on that kind of budget, things that we generally don't think about so much. So that is worth considering, because even if you live in Managua, you're still going to have to get to Migracion part of 6 times throughout the year, at least, plus 2 border runs. So that little bit adds up. And when you go to Migracion, it's generally about $30 for a renewal. Overall, this is very much an average, but we generally assume the cost, not including a border run, of being in the country per day is about $1. Now, for most foreigners who are living here, that's a number we don't even think about. But if you are living on a $300 budget, that is 10% of your budget goes to the fees to exist within the country, mostly the immigration fees. That's just what you pay when you renew your paperwork. So trivial for most people, but this could be very noticeable. So be aware that that's something you have to calculate heavily. Now, of course, you can become a resident. That process generally costs almost nothing if you do it all yourself, but most people want to use a lawyer. Anytime you're using a lawyer, that's going to be a large percentage of your income, so that's something you're going to have to plan around. You're probably going to want to do your residency on your own. However, how do you plan on doing that residency? Because a residency requires, if you're on a pension, a $1,000 USD or equivalent income through pension, or a $1,250 what they call rentista income, which just means, and I said pensione, it's pensionato. That's the Italian version. The rentista, which does not refer to rental income as people like to pretend. It refers to investment income, so income through a passive source, which could involve just owning your own company. There's a lot of different ways to have the rentista income. It's very flexible, but that's $1,250 per month. That's more than 4 times the budget we're talking about. So to qualify for those budgets, you're going to be struggling because you're nowhere near them. It's not like you're coming in at $950. It's only $50 short. There's probably some way to come up with that to make your overall retirement package look like it's big enough for Nicaragua to feel confident in you. That's one thing. But at $300, if that's truly all you have coming from a pension and you have no other income source, then you likely are going to be unable to show the country that you have an income sufficient to stay, to survive, to give them confidence that you will not become a ward of the state, which is their primary concern when bringing people in. And also, they want to make sure that you are able to contribute positively to the country. And for most foreigners, that is done through your expenditures of your income. No specific expenditures, just going to restaurants, going to activities, grabbing a Tonya or whatever. If you don't have any income, then you have a risk of being a drain on the state through healthcare and other things, and no potential to contribute to the state through income. You may contribute some other way. Those are things they can't quantify and can't predict. So that's why it is the way that it is. So at $300, you're obviously barred from the $30,000 minimum buy-in that is not a one-time thing into the investment program. You are not available to the rentista program. You are not available to the pensionato program. That leaves the only possible means of staying in the country once you either want to get away from the border run cost, or you are told you're no longer able to do the border runs. That is not something you can do forever. It's an indefinite amount of time. It could be 1 year, it could be 10 years, but that's up to Migracion. That is their decision. They will let you know. It's not a surprise. Well, it kind of is a surprise. But they will let you know when it's time to stop doing that and tell you to move forward with your residency program. But the only residency program that you will have open to you is marriage. And so that is something that you would have to plan for, that you have to. Now, maybe the person proposing this has already been married here for a long time and just thinks we assume that that is the case. So maybe that's great, and then they don't have to worry about it. But if you are not married and have no particular prospects at this time, that's something you're going to be banking on, that is your only path forward. And I'm not clear if that is going to give you residency automatically, or if there maybe is a little bit extra step. Obviously, you do have to do paperwork. I think you'd be okay, but you are pushing it. That is a number where they may have some concerns. I've never heard of anyone getting questioned on getting a marriage residency, but be aware that that might be something we have to ask questions on, and really make sure that that would still qualify at that income level, because it is so dramatic. And plus, length of time that you've married, I'm sure, would play a factor, and so forth. But let's assume that you are already married or planning on getting married, on the path, engaged, whatever, and that's not going to be a problem. Then you should have that paperwork here. I believe you still have to get your cedula reprinted, but I don't know that 100% for the marriage visa. You may be an exception to that. For the rest of us, we have to get our cedulas reprinted every 6 months. Again, not a big deal, but it is a few dollars, and it is typically a trip to Managua, which again adds up a little bit. But it's only every 6 months rather than several times a year. It's more like every 2 months on average for everyone else. So it would be slightly better. You'd eliminate a bunch of costs, but it's not zero. But that's we're getting into very small numbers and things we'd have to look up and could change over time. So worth being aware of. So all those are considerations. But if you don't plan on getting married, don't want to get married, whatever, then this is not going to be an option for you more than, say, 1 year. Chances are for 1 year, if you're able to live and you don't cause any problems, you're probably fine. You easily could get into your second year. But much beyond that, you're going to run into a position where they're going to ask you about your plans for residency, and those plans are going to be, I have no idea what I'm going to do. Then you have the problem of moving into and out of the country. Of course, getting here, getting out, any of those activities cost money, whether it's just taking a bus, which is relatively cheap, but it's not free. Taking public transportation to the border and walking over the border, Then you're going to have the challenge of living in the neighboring countries, which of course Honduras, very cheap, but they're on the same visa system that we are. So if you're running out of visa here, your visa is going to be run out there already. Costa Rica is super expensive, and right next door, they're the only place that you can cheaply potentially get to start a new visa. Whether they're going to let you in or let you stay for any length of time with only $300 per month is a big question. So there's a lot of, can you logistically even be here, that needs to be answered before you worry about how you're going to afford to do it all. And the Nicaraguans who do, assuming we're able to fix all that and you don't have to go to Costa Rica and all that solved and you are married and you're great, probably it's because you have access to the home of your in-laws and you're going to live with them that you're able to contribute this $300 to their pool, in which case it's probably okay. Difficult, but okay, because if you have a spouse who maybe has $150 to $200 income, or you have a family that's helping with preparing food and you're just contributing to the pot, literally and figuratively, then you're operating like a Nicaraguan at these budgets, and it can be done. Certainly, I know many Nicaraguans who live at these numbers and are able to survive, but none of them do so where they have to deal with getting cedulas, being foreigners, getting visas, or anything like that. All those things take time and money and effort, and while not expensive, it's not nothing. And this kind of budget really does bring that up. Okay, so obviously at this budget, you're not going to be going out to eat. We're taking restaurants right off the table. Yes, some street food would technically probably still be possible. We have to assume that you're not paying rent, or it's just absolutely trivial. We're going to assume you're not going to have air conditioning. There's no way you're going to be able to pay for the electric bill for that unless you end up in a place that has fixed pricing for that, and then you're taking your chances that it doesn't go away. And of course, air conditioning itself has an expense. About the cheapest unit you can get is about $450. You need to install that. Let's assume you can install it yourself. Still, that's a month and a half of income. So that's probably off the table. Having a car, of course, off the table. You're going to need basically everything that you have for basic food and clothing. And it can be done. You're going to be cooking at home. It's going to be loads of rice and beans. There's a reason why gallo pinto and eggs are part of nearly every meal here in Nicaragua. You'll still be able to afford plantains and cheese. We have local cheese that's relatively healthy. It would be most relatable to a mozzarella style. Definitely tastes a bit different than mozzarella, but there is a basic fresh cheese and semi-fresh cheese that are made here in country. They're very inexpensive. They're part of nearly all the standard meals. The rice and beans mixture, gallo pinto, is very quick and easy to prepare. It's very low cost and is high in protein. It's a very complete meal. And so a lot of people, that's all they eat on most days. You mix that with some eggs and that cheese. You have 3 protein sources. There is low cost meat, especially chicken here in the country. A lot of people eat that. So you probably are not going to have that for every meal. A lot of Nicaraguans, that is basically their diets. Normal Nicaraguans, the average Nicaraguan, does not have a variety diet. And this is something that's very challenging for North Americans that are coming here. We have a tendency to really seek variety in the foods that we eat, partially because we are not nutrient complete in any given meal. It's just a tendency in the way that we tend to cook, and it's fine because we have that variety between meals. But part of our drive to want to have variety is because we've grown up with incomplete nutrient meals, and we seek variety to compensate for that. If you ate a normal American meal, the same one every day, I'm not saying a specific one, any specific one, you would get plenty of calories, but you would be missing certain types of nutrients in most cases, and that would be very, very unhealthy. But because we eat the same unhealthy food in a mix, it really compensates heavily for that. It's effective. Here, they do not have that option, and so they tend to have really complete nutrient meals that are relatively basic. It's almost like Soylent Green, where they have a single formulated thing that's going to meet all their needs, and that is the rice and beans, the chicken, sometimes the cheese, sometimes the plantains. And then there is some variety, a little bit of fish now and then, a little bit of beef, a little bit of pork. Those things are mixed in. There are soups. There are a lot of things made with cabbage. There is a little bit of variety, a lot of cornmeal products, a lot of tortilla products, a lot of small variations on a theme, repochetas, like I had for breakfast today, which is really similar to a pan-fried quesadilla. It's a little bit more crispy. It's a corn tortilla. It's slightly different, but the theme is very similar. And so by getting Ida just walked by and dropped a rug on the floor, and another una otra. She is having a little bit of a disaster, and right off camera, so it's perfect timing for her. She's laughing hysterically. So the idea here is that in order to maintain that budget like a Nicaraguan, you're going to need to learn to eat like a Nicaraguan, which is potentially quite healthy, that is not a problem. We're talking about all natural ingredients. We're talking about mostly a vegetarian diet with some healthy meats in most cases, not for me, but for most. And everything is sourced locally. That's really necessary. You're not going to shop at the grocery stores. You're going to be shopping once in a while at the semi-grocery stores like a Pali or a Ahora. Ahora Mas, Save More, which is part of the La Colonia chain but lower cost, and a lot of fruits and veg from the local markets. With that, you can get a little bit of variety, and certainly you can approach things a little bit differently as a foreigner looking to try to add some variety to the taste profile of what you're doing. A little bit of work, but you can do it. That's going to be nearly all of your budget will go into food. What's left over, you're going to want to focus on clothes and other very basic supplies. There's really not a lot to play with. But that's how Nicaraguans do it. They purchase almost nothing. They are careful to make sure their clothes last a long time. Everything is purchased secondhand. Everything is purchased locally. They have friends who go to Managua. Like clothing is much cheaper in Managua than in Leon. Food is cheaper in Leon than in Managua. So you focus on what you're able to get where you live. Most Nicaraguans don't travel around the country. Most live with their family in homes that have long been paid for, and they don't move and don't explore other areas because that's all very costly, and they have very repetitive diets. But they have lively neighborhoods with loud music. You can go out, dance in the streets, hang out with neighbors, go for great walks. There's tons of places almost anywhere in the country where you can go for long walks and explore beautiful things. Healthcare is completely free with really good healthcare, good access to hospitals and clinics all over the country. There are many activities that are very free or low cost going into, especially in the cities. Going to the city center, like here in Leon, there's nearly every weekend something going on in the city center, whether it's a concert or the National Ballet or the Ruben Dario Festival for literature. There's a lot of different things that you can do. Those are nearly always free and open to the public, specifically because people can't afford a lot of activities. So they want to encourage people to go out and be social and be part of their community and be active, and without spending money or without needing to spend money. So there's a lot of that you're able to do and keep yourself entertained without having to drive, without having to go to other areas and so forth. And of course, there's loads of parades. You can go out and get involved in the community, do all kinds of activities where you're like volunteering, whether volunteering to play an instrument in a band or help out with the museum or just whatever. There are things that can be done at an incredibly low budget. Not everything costs money here, so that's great. But this is certainly an experiment in just how much a foreigner can push it to the absolute limits. And the way to really think about it is that a Nicaraguan really struggles to live at $200 a month. They do it, but it is a struggle. It is a very hard thing to do, and we should all feel very badly for those who have to do that. It is not a great lifestyle in many ways. However, in others, it's often still quite a bit better than living at still $2,000 or $3,000 a month in the United States. So it is comparative. But because they get good health care, because there is a healthy food option, because they do have great weather, they don't have to worry about suddenly having snowstorms and having to heat their house. They don't have to worry about having these sudden heat snaps and dying if they don't have air conditioning. Like the weather is very stable other than the rain and dry. So a lot of those things make it much cheaper to live. But the lack of variety in food will often drive Americans or North Americans quite crazy because it's such a huge leap in custom, but you really need to think of it that a Nicaraguan is going to be living at a $200 budget. If you have a $300 budget, roughly $100 of that is going to go to the overhead of being a foreigner. There's going to be just cost involved with that. They're not huge, but on that budget, it's going to be noticeable. So you're going to be living like you make $200 here because of that $100 roughly that goes towards whatever that is. Hopefully you're able to get that marriage visa, get that lowered to as minimal as possible. Maybe it'll just be more like $10, $20 per month, and you will have a little bit of extra spending to put into food and clothes and other absolute necessities. Of course, paying for internet can be very difficult. You're probably at that pay scale. People do not have internet at home. They live with internet on their phones or manage to get it free from the city centers. A lot of the city centers, a lot of the big parks in the country have free Wi-Fi. So you'll see people go out that are quite poor, use those so they get free Wi-Fi and don't have to pay for anything on their phones. Of course, you can get service on your phone for roughly, this is with Tigo or Claro, $11 to $12 per month with the prepago system. So having a very low-cost cell phone that you take very good care of. A lot of Nicaraguans don't put cases on them. You have to put a case on your phone. It's the most expensive thing you own. Protect it a little bit. Have a screen protector. You'll get an extra year or two out of it. It'll save you so much money. With that, figure you're going to spend about $12 per month to maintain a number, and you'll have internet on your phone. And because they get unlimited WhatsApp and often like unlimited Netflix, YouTube, and some other things, you'll be able to have some entertainment that you're able to stream from that. And as long as you don't have air conditioning, don't do any unnecessary electrical things, generally you can stay in the minimum tier of electricity for your family, and that is normally shared between multiple people and is about between $5 and $10 per month. Once you get to normal expenditures for foreigners, we're into a different tier of electrics. We pay much, much more. Typically, the lowest that I was paying in a house was 85, and now we're into several hundred, which is far more normal. So you can live like a Nicaraguan and get the advantages of the way that they live, but you have to live like a Nicaraguan. You'll have to be in a barrio, which I'm in a barrio, that's fine, but you're going to have to be living in very poor parts of the barrio with other people who are making similar pay scale to have any hope of being able to make it. I hope that answers something. This is a difficult thing that you're trying to do, and I'm very sorry that there's not an easy answer. I would say that I don't know what your nationality is. I don't know what your capability of working is, but anything you can do to find a little bit of extra work, it has to be outside the country, I would say. Anything you can do to find some outside work, it has to be outside the country. You're not going to be able to work here inside the country. Anything you can do to bring in a little extra income, even if you find just the tiniest side job, a couple hours a month, working just, between $5 and $10 per hour. If you're able to do that from a foreign income source, you only need to do that for maybe 8 to 10 hours per month to be completely game changing as to the amount of money that you have. And of course, any little bit extra you can make per hour or the number of hours that you're able to work will be huge offsets to your lifestyle. Now, of course, that's going to require that you have a computer or an internet connection in most cases, so be aware of that. But those little bits that you're able to add on will be dramatic. So consider that may be something you want to do, or at least do as long as you can, because it'll help out a lot. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe if you'd like to help support the channel. Not anyone who needs to live at $300 a month, please do not support the channel if that's the kind of challenges you're living with. But for those who can't afford to, please consider buying me a coffee at the link above, buymeacoffee.com/Scott Allen Miller. It's like Patreon, comes directly to me, helps support the channel, and we don't sell anything here, so that helps provide for the cost of all the things that we do. And of course, we have a join button. You can send in videos. I love it when people send in video questions so we can add to the show. Get down in the comments, say hello, introduce yourself, ask questions, whatever. Love having interaction there. Of course, watch another video, tell a friend about the show, and I will see all of you tomorrow.